Kia ora again. So as I said, my name is Dan Scott Ransford. I'm a tech strategist at Microsoft. I have had the privilege of working in the working with AI and generative AI for the last almost 3 years. My day job at Microsoft is to help businesses build their own AI solutions and enable their applications with AI. And so over that time, over this last 3 years, I've really found or seen these organizations who maybe have one or two features go from having one or two generative AI features to 10 and 20 features. And I've seen as this acceleration into the era of AI, this extensive growth in AI features and the challenges that that brings. And I think at Microsoft, we've all seen this. We've seen everyone jumping on board, and we've started to see some amazing and great new features being built using generative AI, which are having a massive impact. However, these features all require productization to get or operation of them to get them into the hands of users. So what I'm going to do today is take you through LLM Ops and introduce you to Azure AI Studio, which is the LLM Ops platform that Microsoft has put together to help businesses build these AI features. So with that in mind, let's take a little bit of a look at the challenges that we see these that occur when we build these features at scale, when we need to productize or operationalize these AI based features. So the first challenge that we see is AI features were typically built by data scientists. They were trained, models were trained, they were put into a container and then maybe thrown over the fence to developers. But with these new generative AI tools, which are generally just what we would typically call just calling an API, we need both developers and data scientists to have access to the same set of tools and the same sets of practices and patterns. So that's become a new challenge. We are also seeing this tech evolving extremely quickly, models coming out every day. It's often hard to know where to start. Do I need RAG? Don't I need to RAG? Do I need fine tune? Don't I need to fine tune? Multimodal models, all of these things. We need to help people understand, where do you get started? The other challenge, and if I spent, before joining Microsoft, I spent 6 years as a continuous delivery or DevOps practice lead, and we were always facing the challenge of things being thrown over the wall, developers building something and then tossing it over the wall to operations to run. And this is where DevOps really came in to address that challenge. But we're now seeing that challenge again with generative AI apps. How do we take all the learning of the things that we've been building with DevOps and these practices and cultures we've been building with DevOps and bring that into the era of Gen AI, so that work is not just being thrown over the wall. We're building testable generative AI applications. Testing and evaluation is hard. If you've written unit tests against a generative AI system, it is non-deterministic. These models don't always give the same output. How do you automatically test them? And we often think, you build a generative AI application, you put it in production, but what happens on day one? What happens on day 10? How do you release new changes? How do you test and continuously test these things? How do you evaluate these systems? That's a new challenge we now have to deal with. The increasing complexity of generative AI applications. We used to think, just plug in GPT-4, put a chat interface, and you're good to go. But most of these solutions now are they have multiple models involved, embeddings, and multiple types of model, and also multimodal. For example, models that take text and images. We have to deal with evaluating and monitoring generative AI apps in production. This is a different process now. So how do you monitor whether an application is the generative AI application is doing the right thing? Users finding the output helpful. Is the process continuing to do what it's supposed to do as we evolve the models and the prompts? We also need to be able to trace these assets. For example, if we build an index for a retrieval augmented generation to help bring our knowledge to these models, how do we trace the asset? How do we, you know, look at a particular model a particular asset version that's deployed to production and say behaves this way when it's in production with this asset? So we need that auditability. And then finally, really responsible AI. This has become extremely critical. We need to put privacy and security and grounding, and all these are new techniques that we have not had to do at this scale before. And all of this is about scale, going from one product or generative AI feature to 10 to hundreds, and then doing this across an entire business, and then doing this over and over again every week, every sprint, releasing a new version. So this is where the techniques of LLM Ops comes in. And I'm going to dive into some demos in really shortly, but I just wanted to give you a grounding of what are the challenges that we need to really deal with. And DevOps and ML Ops have been looking at this for a while, but neither of these quite fit. So we need to adjust and add in some additional stuff for LLM Ops. So what is LLM Ops? Basically, it is the set of people, process, and practices or platforms, that help us continuously deliver generative AI apps. If you've worked in DevOps, you know these 3 points very well. You know these practices. LLM Ops attempts to take those 3, people, process, and platform, or people, process, and technology, depending on what you want to how you see it, and apply those to LLM based applications. Now, obviously, with this new series of this new practice of LLM Ops, we need a tool to support that. I love Azure DevOps, I love GitHub, I love Azure ML. All of those tools are great. They don't quite fit. We need a set of tools that do help us fit that, and this is where Azure AI Studio comes in. It helps us with this LLM Ops flow of exploring models, comparing how they work, evaluating them, improving the quality of the output, integrating them into our application, continuously testing, reviewing what is going on, deploying, and then monitoring. These are all familiar if you're in DevOps land, but we need to adjust them for LLM Ops. So Azure AI Studio brings all that together, all of those processes, and has tools to help you do each of them. But it also acts as a container, not the Docker type of container, a collection of all of the services, the Azure AI services that typically go into building an AI based feature. We previously we would we deploy an Azure speech over here, an Azure OpenAI here, content safety here. We might put some Azure AI search here. All of those resources became quite disjointed. Azure AI Studio brings all of them into one UI and also helps deploy and manage them along with all those models, and helps you manage the life cycle as well as data and assets that come in. So we're gonna do some demos now. So I want to start with a bit of what we're going to talk about in the demos. So let's build a retail Q&A chat experience in Azure AI Studio for Contoso DIY. Everyone's familiar with Contoso, biggest company in the world by now, I think. But we've got Rita, who really we want an experience for Rita. So we're going to use RAG, retrieval augmented generation, and I'm sure many of you are already familiar with that. But fundamentally, we are going to be pulling data from a product index as part of a chat, and that product index contains all the products for Contoso DIY, so that Rita can say, my heater just broke, I need something to heat my home. And it comes back with some helpful information, some products, and all that sort of stuff. Now we could do that with with Azure OpenAI Studio, but that is an experience that is not going to scale to productize or operationalize this stuff. It doesn't allow us to test or evaluate or continuously improve or monitor our solution. So as I mentioned, we are using retrieval augmented generation. So if you're not familiar with it, it is the process of augmenting your prompt with relevant data, in this case, products. I'm not going to go into too much detail about that here, but it is a key practice and principle that is both important in generative AI applications, but also is a key feature of AI Studio and LLM Ops. So let's head over to the demo. Now I'm going to be doing everything in AI Studio, and if you want to go and try this yourself, you can right now. Just go to ai.azure.com, log in with your Azure credential. but I will flip my screen. When you log into Azure AI Studio, as you can see, I'm in here, ai.azure.com. You land on the welcome page. Now, this is going to show you a lot of getting started stuff. What do you want to do? Pretty obvious stuff here. You also can see the recent projects, and we'll talk about projects shortly. You see the recent projects you've worked on, and as you can see, I've done all sorts of weird and wonderful things, and you can get an idea of the models that are available. When I say models, these are generative AI models. They could be vision, they could be multimodal, they could be speech to text, text to speech, or text text to text. So what I'm going to do is quickly dive over to Explore, and this is where I can actually look at the available models. Now, a lot of people sort of think Azure OpenAI and think OpenAI, but that is not all we have in here. There are all the Mistral models, there are Meta models, there are Falcon, there is Stable Diffusion, you name it, and there is also all the Hugging Face. But what you can do is you can go and have a look at benchmarking those models so that you can pick the right model for your particular use case. But I'm not going to go into that in too much detail here. What I want to do is really kick you off, get you started with this stuff. So the first thing we need to do is create what we call an AI hub. An AI hub is a resource in Azure. It is basically the container that contains all the other AI services, and it is also where your projects will go. And I usually need to create one. I've got to create one in a region. The easiest way is go to manage and create new hub. You can accept the hub name, etc. Pick a location. You can select Azure and Azure OpenAI service, or create a new one. You can create an Azure AI search or connect an existing one. Or you can, if you really want to, you can also go and customize this to a different level. I will go and quickly just call mine Global Azure 2024 C. I've created a lot of these now. I'll create a resource group. I'll just leave that as the default resource group. Leave that as the default. I'll create a new Azure search. I'll call it AIS. Of course, in a real scenario, I would be I would have a naming standard that's much better than this, and I might select regions such as Switzerland North, as long as there's the resources available and you've got the quota. I click next, and it will go and create that all those resources in the back end in their Azure, and you can see those resources. But I'm not going to do that because it does take about a minute, and we have very short amount of time. But I'll show you quickly what that looks like. So once it's deployed, you will end up with a number of resources. You will end up with the AI search, as I mentioned, that's the index for our RAG. We will end up with this AI services and this AI hub. The services are think of that as a wrapper around things like Azure OpenAI service, Azure Speech, etc. So we've wrapped all those together, and we've got this hub resource, and that is actually what is shown in here with these hubs. So once we've got a hub, we can now start creating projects. Now, there are multiple ways to do this, but if I head over to build, this is where I'm going to start to build my resource. So I'm going to go and call this Retail Chat 2. This is just the name of what I'm building. This is probably my AI whatever feature I'm building. There's lots of ways to structure this. I will select a hub. As you can see, I have lots of them. I put them all over the place. So I'm going to select my 2024B, which is I put in Switzerland. I create a new project, and that is actually going to take a couple of moments to create. And what it is actually doing is creating a resource in Azure. And you can see this is my fraud detection project that I put there. But I could have, you'll see in a moment, it'll show the fraud, it'll show Retail Chat 2 in there, but we won't wait for that. This does take usually between 20 and 40 seconds. So while that happens, I'll quickly show you what another, if I can click through into that resource. You don't see it, it doesn't actually have anything in here. It's pretty much just says launch to Azure AI Studio. But what you can do is you can also grant permissions to those resources and give people access to that project, so you can work together on those solutions. So what we've got now is the next thing we need to do is we need to deploy some models. No good to have an AI solution without any models. So I'm going to go deployments, and I'm going to click create and select a real-time deployment, a real-time endpoint. Now I can select one of these models And this means that I will only, this type of model, I only get charged if I'm using it. So I confirm. As you can see, I've already deployed a couple of models. Again, these are just the OpenAI models that I'm using. I can select the number of tokens that I want for this. Now, I've deployed 3 models. I've got GPT-3.5 Turbo, if we have a look in here, GPT-4, and an embedding model, which I need for my RAG, so my retrieval augmented generation. Now that I've got that, what I'm going to do is I need some data to populate into my index. Remember I said we needed to bring products into the solution? So what I've actually got, I have Fabric. Now, this could be an Azure storage account. It could be a number of different places, but I put everything into Azure, into Microsoft Fabric. I have 1,000 products here. Now, these are just text. These are just blobs of text. They're semi-structured, I would call them. They're basically some text I generated. I created all this. So pretty basic stuff. What I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the location of these files. Again, if it was a storage account, I could use the storage account URL, whatever it is. But I just wanted to use this Fabric just to demonstrate how easy it is to do this. So what I need to do now is bring some data into the solution. So I'm going to select data. I'm going to click new data. I'm going to, I can select a search connection, but I can go get data with storage URL. Now, post my URL, and there's lots of different options here. What is actually happening is I'm creating a data asset inside this solution, inside this project, and that asset is being versioned for me. Now, what I will do is click next, and I have to give it a name. And what it's actually going to do is going to verify that it can get access. It's using my products, oops, product data. Now, not date, data. Okay, so what is actually going to happen here? It's going to create me a pipeline to create or to pull this data across. And what that I can add new versions of this asset. I can add new data to it and create that as a new version. So now I've got that auditable asset that I can use. So what I'm going to do now is turn this data into a index in my Azure AI search. So what I go do is click new index, and it's going to say select your data source. Cool. Uh, lucky I have use existing project data that I deployed when I deployed this hub. I'm using an embedding model. Now, what this is saying is, hey, look, I want to use the embedding model from this Azure OpenAI service, which was automatically deployed. I click next, and I can say product index. Right. This is actually creating a pipeline that I can rerun over and over again every time my data updates to regenerate my index. And now I have an auditable asset. Now, this will spin up a virtual machine to run this process. It does take a little while, and we can actually see what it looks like. It generates this job. Oops, my screen has gone blank there for a second. Okay, it's coming back. It will run this job, and what I will do is I'll show you quickly what that job looks like. So as this is a completed job, and over here you can see that it cracked and chunked those product TXT files. Those were the source of my products. It updated Azure Cognitive Search, which this should say AI Search, but the team haven't yet updated this. And then we've registered that index inside Azure AI Search. So that is now available as an index that I can add in the playground, or I can build as part of a prompt flow. Now, prompt flow is extremely important. It's very powerful, and we're going to show you that in a second. But if we actually click through to have a look at the job details, we actually get to see This is our job. This is in Azure ML. Now, Azure ML actually sits underneath Azure AI Studio. So if you're familiar with Azure ML Studio, you will see a lot of common stuff with it. But what is fantastic is all these tools work really well together. So as you can see, here's my pipeline. I can evaluate. I can look at all the logs used, and I can rerun this pipeline over and over again. But that's nice. What I really want to do is use that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to head back over to my, let's go to this, let's head to um, global, I've got to go to the right project. I'm going to go to this project, this hub here. Apologies, I go to the project, not the hub. I'm going to create a new, sorry, I'm going to go into Contoso retail chat. This is one I've created earlier. I don't want to wait for the index to create, so I'm going to go and create a new prompt flow. So I've gone over to this Contoso retail chat project that I created earlier, and I've got the index in there already happily generated. As you can see there, data's ready. I'm going to go to the playground, and I'm going to go and say I'm going to create a new AI. Now, I have got a system prompt right here that I'm going to add. Now, this is, if we have a look at closely, this is just saying you're an assistant AI assistant for Canosa DIY. It's got a whole lot of guardrails on what the AI can do, what it can't do. So I'm plugging this in. I spent a lot of time crafting this prompt to make sure it was going to do the right thing, give it, applying a whole lot of safety, but I could also build a whole lot of other safety in there. I'm going to apply that. I'm also going to select GPT-4 as my model, like GPT-4, and I'm going to add my data. Now, remember how I created that index? I can now see I've got my product index there, and I don't actually have to, go and this is a permanent asset that I can use in any prompt flow. So now I've done that. What I can now ask is help my help my heater is broken. I need to heat my house. Yep. So what it's going to do is it is going off. It is actually going off to that index, assembling all pulling relevant index entries out of that index, and now it is giving me some useful information, including the references. And I didn't give it any guidance on how it should do, including the references, those docs that I generated. Now, this is all great, well and good. This is great for experimenting. But the real power here, as I mentioned, is in prompt flow. Prompt flow is an SDK that that wraps up these types of AI-driven workflows so that you can evaluate, test, you can manage them using your source control. You can, version them. You can do pull requests on them. All of this stuff. Now, the easiest way to get started with prompt flow is just go in here, create your create your playground, click prompt flow, and it's going to go and generate retail chat PF2. I'll call it because I know I've created this. Now that will go and create a prompt flow. You will get these errors for now. This is due to it defaulting a couple of things. I think they'll sort that before once it's GA. But whilst it does that, I'm going to go over to one that I've already created. So I created this earlier, this one earlier. Now, this is what it is going to create for you. Now, when you usually use these chats, you kind of expect them to behave you think they just send to the model and come back. There's actually a lot of machinery that happens. And you can customize that to the nth degree. You can build these flows to be very complicated. So as we can see, what is actually being built for us is a prompt flow that says, first, figure out what does the user actually want to do. So this might be, hey, you want to buy a product, or they want to know store opening hours, or they want to know safety instructions. But in my case, I've got one intent, which is I want a product. We extract the intent. We retrieve the documents from the index. Now, all of this is built for me. Now, I have had to configure a couple of things when this was built. For example, I want to use GPT-3.5 Turbo model for my extract intent. I have selected my Azure OpenAI connection and my text embedding ADA 002 model for generating the embeddings or for embedding the question. And then I've selected GPT-4 to determine the reply. So you notice my AI flow has using 3 model calls, 3 LLM calls. So as you can see, and I might even have a stock request that goes off to an API and get some stock. But here is my system prompt that you saw earlier, but with a couple of other things. I'm injecting the previous conversation, and I'm adding the documentation that was pulled from the format retrieve documents. And as you can see, all this wiring is there. So what I have able to do is I'm able to click this chat and do the exact same thing. Now, I've done this a little bit earlier. We're running a little bit low on time. So I ran the exact same thing, helped my heater broke. But what I'm now able to do is look at the outputs, look at how many tokens we used. I can even have what we call variants in our prompts. I can do what we call evaluations, which means I can evaluate my prompt 1,000 times or 10,000 times on my AI workflow against a whole lot of question and answers to get me to check that my AI, my workflow, my prompt flow is working exactly how I want. And finally, I can do this all via code. I can do it here in the UI, but I can just open this up, spin up Visual Studio on the desktop or the web. And what it's going to do is it's going to actually run some compute and spin up this. And here is the exact same prompt flow in a browser, in Visual Studio Code, running in a browser. I can go and change all this stuff, rewrite the code. I can go and push that to GitHub. Assuming everyone's using GitHub or Azure DevOps, I'm pushing that to a Git repo. So that is really, in a nutshell, how Azure AI Studio works. It is extremely important that you adopt this early in your journey, even though it is not production yet. I would not GA yet. I would suggest having a look at it, because LLM Ops, as we go, is going to become more and more important. But I'm going to wrap up
Thank you.
quickly with some resources where we go to Q&A. So while we do Q&A, here's 3 things I want you to have a look at. Learning path, create custom co-pilots using Azure AI Studio. Here's the Azure AI docs. And a third thing we just announced, which was the LLM Ops maturity model. This helps you
Beautiful.
plan your LLM Ops journey and measure that maturity. So that's it.
Thank you.
Questions?
Thank you so much, Dan. That was super cool. I've actually not seen a question in the chat, but I'm actually super interested in the prompt flow. That is super cool. So just quick question. So when you say evaluate, so like evaluated 1,000 times, does that go and test actually the prompt flow, like ask it a question and then come back and was like, oh, it cracked here?
Exactly, it actually does. So you can, if I switch back, when you do evaluate, you are evaluating the prompt against a set of question and answer pairs that you may have. And you might, so when I go and do an evaluation, I can do a built-in evaluation. Wants me to save my changes. I can say, look, I want to use a question and answer set that maybe I generated from watching users' interactions or recording users' interactions, questions, answers against my AI. And when they gave me a thumbs up, I might say, actually, that's a good answer. Therefore, I want to use that in my evaluation set. Now, you can't just say the output is good or bad. True or correct or false. You actually have to measure it using an LLM itself. So these evaluations are done using an LLM.
Nice.
But
That is
that's
super cool.
definitely something you need to get used to using.
I really love the flow, prompt flow. That is super cool because actually it's a lot of the time we do that ourselves as humans. So like you ask the LLM something, it gives you an answer, then you ask it something else. But if you put it all in a flow, it goes through, okay, so what each step is actually giving you an output. And I really love how simple it is. And I really love your style of explaining stuff. So that is super cool. And there is a question, a small question, which is rough projected costing. How do people think about costing?
So Azure AI Studio itself does not cost anything, but every call, depending on the model, every call you make to an LLM costs a certain, uses tokens, and the token cost is something you need to factor in. But as we're seeing over time, model costs are continuing to go down. 3.5 Turbo, when it first came out, was a lot more expensive than it is now. So, but you need to plan that. And this is also what AI Studio helps you do. Notice how it recorded the number of tokens I was sending. So you can use that to model how much your service is going to cost or how much your AI is going to cost. But and that's a great point, by the way.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Daniel. Appreciate it. Thank you so much, mate. Appreciate your
Cool.
time today.
Thank you, everyone, for coming. Thank you for listening.
See you, mate.